I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Movie 101 Review. Movie 101 Review is created to empower movies itself. My partner in crime, Miss Safa Bernal.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are having a fantastic day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world, whatever time zone you're in. It's so exciting to be here today to talk about movies.
Movies.
I love it.
Yes. So last
Okay.
week, Miss Bernal, let's do the recap of what we talked last week. I think Ridley Scott, yeah?
Last week we talked about one of my top 10 movies of all time, Gladiator. Absolutely loved that film. It was the first Ridley Scott film that I had seen since Blade Runner when I was a teenager. And oh my gosh, I just absolutely loved the performances. I loved the emotional vulnerability and availability. I loved the action. I liked the philosophy behind it. You know, the whole thing. It was just perfectly shot. It was gold. So absolutely, if you have not seen Gladiator, go find a copy of the director's cut of Gladiator. By far my favorite version of that film, and give it a go. Definitely one of those movies for the ages.
Movies of the ages. Yes, highly recommended, people, by Gladiator by Ridley Scott, and looking forward for, is it the remake or the part 2?
It's a sequel.
A sequel.
Yeah, so it takes place after the events of Gladiator 1 with Lucilla's son. So it is an actual sequel. It is a continuation of the story and not a redo of the original story, which I think is the only way you can really approach it. You know, I don't think that remaking that movie would necessarily stand. I don't think that there's anything more to say that they hadn't already done. I think that Russell Crowe and everybody that was part of that film just did a fantastic job as it was. So I definitely think that trying to tell a story further to further tie up loose ends after Maximus's death, I think that is
Yes,
definitely the approach to take.
looking forward for that. And today, Miss Bernal, which movie we're gonna talk
today we are going to something almost completely different with Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. This was released, I believe, at Cannes in May of 1994. So I was knee-high to a grasshopper and did not get to see this movie until I was, in my 20s, in film school. And, what a wild ride.
So do you think, Miss Bernal, this is the trademark of Mr. Quentin Tarantino?
I think it gets there. Between his earlier works like Pulp Fiction, you definitely see his style continue to grow through things like Inglourious Basterds and, other films that he's done. The Kill Bill franchise was just incredible too. I think Pulp Fiction really brought back that sense of non-linear, almost punk storytelling, that idea that we're postmodern, we're not doing things in a linear fashion, that we're skipping from one thing to another and loosely tangling and loosely tying up webs until you get to the end of the movie. And I really like how he approaches that style. I like how he has fun with it. I think, in my opinion, this is a film that looked to be just a breath of air, but it was also very... It's artful in the approach he has to schlock, in the approach he has to pulp, and of course the name Pulp Fiction. I mean, Pulp Fiction was a very specific kind of fiction, in the last century, kind of in the late 1800s. So one of the very first Pulp Fiction magazines actually ended up starting to gain popularity in the 1880s, and then in 1896 when it became the Pulp Fiction magazine known as Argosy. So you got kind of that expression of pulp, especially once we get into the 20s and 30s, where these were cheap paper. This was a very cheap print, but all of these tropes and all of these different storylines was just go, 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 go. This is where we get things like a lot of kind of B-movie sci-fi, and also where we get things like sword and sorcery, like Conan the Barbarian and all that kind of thing. That's what Pulp Fiction was. And so having all of these visceral, kind of risky short stories kind of mashing up together in a film like Pulp Fiction is just such a celebration of Pulp Fiction as it was in the first place. I think he did a tremendous job.
Definitely. High five, Mr. Quentin. So, what are the special effects typically created in Pulp Fiction, Miss Bernal?
And the special effects weren't so much of the massive thing with Pulp Fiction, not like it is in his later films with Kill Bill and with, Inglourious Basterds. But what we do see in Pulp Fiction is the stylized violence. And so I think the special effects, it's Uma Thurman when she's brought back from a little bit of a heart failure. It's the blood and the gore that you see with, Vincent Vega and Jules Winfield. It's the scenes with Bruce Willis where he ends up getting trapped with a man in a leather suit of ill repute. Let me say it that way.
Yes.
The blood, the over-the-top kind of violence of it, that's where I'd see the effects more. I think this one's definitely not an effects-heavy film when you think of things like CGI and all that kind of thing. But when it comes to, the motorcycle chase, when it comes to the cars, when it comes to that use of firearms and violence, it was incredibly aesthetic. It was incredibly kind of snappy and stylized. Oh yeah. Oh.
Yes. I think Pulp Fiction was open in 1994 in the movie theater. But nowadays, Miss Bernal, that streaming platform are open. Do you think success of Pulp Fiction is the same with the streaming platform?
I think it's definitely going to be able to see a bigger audience now, because let's be honest about Tarantino's work. Tarantino is one of the main directors that you kind of hide your children from. It's like, oh, hide the kids. There's a new Tarantino film, and unapologetically so. He's gone on record to say that, my movies are my movies. This is what I do. This is the level of depravity to expect. So in that way, I think Pulp Fiction was kind of sequestered and cloistered. It became a sort of adult art house almost, cult film. And then upon now the digital age where, we could just click a button and see it, I think more people are being able to appreciate it for what it was, the postmodern style, the self-referential nature of it, the intertextuality, the non-linear nature of the storytelling. I think people are going to be able to kind of cling to it. The one thing I wonder, though, is kids growing up and then coming to a point where they can watch and appreciate it now. I don't know how attention spans changing over the last 20 years is going to affect how people approach something like Pulp Fiction. And I think that's a question for a lot of movies. A lot of really good movies of the last 100 years, by today's standards, are incredibly slow. And, we've seen with, the Gen Z coming up and Gen Alpha, that attention spans are getting so much slower. Not slower. They're just like, they're so quick. Like they can't concentrate the same way on something that's a really long shot and things like that without needing something else to do in their hands. And a lot of that, people are saying, oh, social media, but not just social media, the way that social media presents things like, reels and short form content where you've got 5 seconds before somebody flicks it and goes to something else and goes to something else and goes to something else. And there's this constant like in order to keep somebody's attention. And yet you have something like Pulp Fiction with all these storylines kind of intersecting by the end. And you're trying to figure out, what is going on. And I think people could really handle watching movies like this now. and watching other movies that maybe were a little bit more linear, and had that slower form before they came into themselves. It's going to be interesting to see what movies shake down in the next 20 years as being the classics.
Yes,
I think it's.
definitely. So do you think Pulp Fiction will have a sequel or prequel?
I think Tarantino has left quite a bit of room to have other stories told in the same universe. And I would wonder too about whether or not he would do something like that. I think you could say that anything that he creates, it could almost just plug in and play within this greater world. I don't necessarily know whether or not there would be a sequel. I know that Tarantino has said in interviews that he would make a prequel and a sequel to Pulp Fiction, and the prequel would probably be around Vincent Vega, which was John Travolta's character, that kind of thing. I'm unsure of whether that will ever take place. I think too, if you're going to do a prequel with John Travolta, this was released in 1994. It has been 30 years since then.
Revealing your
Oh,
age.
oof. It's been 30 years since Pulp Fiction was released. Do you use, Vincent Vega? Do you use John Travolta? Do you find somebody that looks and has his cadence, which is incredibly difficult because John Travolta is John Travolta. He's just got this, he's got his own unique presence. Do you use CGI to, make his face more youthful, like they did with Harrison Ford in the latest indie movie? You also have the potential for a sequel with Samuel L. Jackson's character, which I think would be fantastic. But I think he's probably potentially moved on because I believe that there are some complications with Miramax. So obviously Tarantino owns the copyright to Pulp Fiction, to the script of Pulp Fiction, because he wrote it. He wrote it. It's his film, but Miramax made it. And so Miramax owns the rights to the finished film. And so there's some legal complications there with using that media, which I think are kind of important to realize, that even the scriptwriter of a movie, even the person who's like, this is mine from a directorial standpoint, this is mine from a writer's standpoint, I am the writer, I'm the director, I'm the producer, this is my film, this is my project, this is my baby, it's my thing, this is what I've been doing for the past 10 years, this is my thing. Yet you had it made by, a company which owns the finished film. So you don't have necessarily, as a writer in Hollywood, you don't have creative rights over the finished project the way that, say, the author of a novel has creative rights over their book. So I think there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of difficulty there.
Definitely. So before we go on, Miss Bernal, let's shout out our listeners in Japan. Wow, thank you, Japan.
Well,
Thank you, Japan, for supporting this podcast. So in Chiba, we got 33% audience share. Nagano, Yogo, Tokyo, and Sayatama. Arigato gozaimasu. Hike. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower movies itself. So, Miss Bernal, what are the elements that make Pulp Fiction blockbuster?
Ooh. One, the intersecting narratives. Two, what we end up seeing is an incredibly violent film. And yet you have those movies like the dance scene with Uma Thurman and John Travolta, because she wants to win the dance. And he's dancing basically with the boss's wife. You've got that tension there. You've got all of these intersecting storylines that eventually kind of tie together. I think the adrenaline shot where Uma Thurman's character overdoses, that one is just something that if you've seen it, it will stick with you. You will not be able that it's in your brain. It lives there rent free. It will always be there. It's taking up the guest room. Try and forget it. I bet you won't. There's also the divine intervention scene. So the scene where Jules and Vincent, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are miraculously saved from a barrage of gunfire. I could speak today. Gunfire. I am so good at speaking. Wow. There's all of these incredible bullet holes. There's all of these incredible shots that were just flung in the middle of the diner. And the diner is a place that we see multiple times throughout the story, and Jules and Vincent are saved, through seemingly miraculous circumstances. And that too, that sense of timing and coincidence when it comes to Pulp Fiction, I think is going to be one of those things that people really go back to. There's also the old school, and again, Pulp Fiction. So he's going back to some ways of doing things from old school film with that rear projection on the driving scenes. So when you look at the driving scenes, he used this sort of black and white rear projected footage to contrast with the color, the color of all of the actors. And I'm not using color there as a race-based term. I'm saying you literally had black and white rear projected footage to make the color footage pop out of the screen. That kind of thing was something that they used to do quite a bit back in the day, and they used to have a lot of rear projected content for a driving scene because, of course, it was safer than certain other kinds of things. I think just the camera work alone is something that people will remember. I think that having so many incredible actors, there's not one actor in Pulp Fiction that doesn't stand. That doesn't just kind of, wow, give a performance. I don't know how Tarantino did it, but kudos to Tarantino for being able to get, that incredible range out of these people. It must have been, I hope, a lot of fun.
Definitely.
And of course, the violence.
Violence, yes. So, Miss Bernal, if you compare Pulp Fiction to Silence of the Lamb, because
completely different. Silence of the Lamb has a very calculated and dangerous tension to it. It's that slow burn kind of thriller where you're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the sincerity and seriousness of this quite dangerous psychology. With Pulp Fiction, the violence is right there in front of you and it's glorified. It's this, we're exploring some feelings of morality and fate versus free will and timing and style over substance, the nature of fiction. Like we're kind of, we're investigating all of these different lives and how they interconnect. But the main thing is this thing is a lot of fun because it's over the top, gratuitous violence. It's pure schlock, pure entertainment value. It's meant to be overly gratuitous. I don't know what their budget was on blood packs that they used, but my gosh, holy wow. It's just, I think, and I think this is something that Quentin Tarantino has been called on several times over the years with his movies, just the overt nature of violence within them. And he's said on multiple occasions that he's just here to entertain, that he's like, well, whatever, this is what I do. This is what I do. I don't see anything, like, we're having fun, whereas something like Silence of the Lambs, I think, is far more serious. In a way, I think it deals with things in this very creepy way that sort of hovers on the edge of your soul, where Pulp Fiction makes you want to go to a diner and dance for.
That's true. That's true, Miss Bernal. So if you compare Pulp Fiction to the franchise of Mr. Quentin Kill Bill franchise,
I think Kill Bill, for me, the aesthetic of Kill Bill was ramped up, even from Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction still had that sort of American grittiness to it, where you were seeing certain areas of a city, and they're not necessarily the nicest areas, like especially with Bruce Willis's storyline and that kind of thing. And they're not necessarily, the Beverly Hills kind of areas and things like that we got to see. I think, too, just by nature of Pulp Fiction and the way that it was in that way, it was less art production, stylized, where they were able to use some very real places that really are part of this world. Whereas once we get to Kill Bill, you're seeing these sort of grandiose sets. I mean, you're also seeing, a house on the side and a tiny little chapel on, in a small town and things like that. But you get to those scenes, especially, Kill Bill, the bride against the, for lack of a better term, martial artists, the ninjas, the Yakuza guys, you see that, and the whole set is just an incredibly stylized, amazing set. I think that he found this sort of really punchy, modern, viscerally colorful beat when it came to the Kill Bill series. That was a step up production value wise, in my opinion, from some of the stuff that we see in Pulp Fiction. Not that one is better than the other. They're just both incredibly movies, but I think just the nature of Kill Bill being more of that ultra-violent revenge martial arts movie, that they had more room to play with the aesthetics than they would in something like Pulp Fiction. And so that and the stylization of the violence, I mean, come on, the sword play alone, the wire fu, you're getting into wire fu, you're getting into swordplay, you're getting into this incredible martial arts action, and it's a lot of fun. It's ridiculous. It's out of the world. Nobody as a martial artist can watch Kill Bill and be like, oh yeah, no, that's completely realistic. Like, I can totally do that. I can do that. I can absolutely do that. Oh yeah, prove it. Okay, let's go. Come on YouTube. Let's see this. Prove it. It's so out there, and it's just entertaining. Like, you get to watch it, you're like, whoa, dude, look at that. Oh, that's so awesome. Like, I remember watching that first one with my brother, and we just spent the entire time go, oh, dude, rewind, click, 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 back, back, watch it again, back, watch it again, back, watch it again. Okay, let's go. It's
Kill
just
Bill franchise is your stepping stone to learn martial arts.
in a way. I had been a fan of action movies far before Kill Bill was on the scene and things like that. I think, if we want to talk my stepping stones to martial arts, in film, I think I'd have to go a little bit with okay, I'm outing myself as an absolute nerd right now, but it would have to be Worf teaching the rest of the main crew of the Starship Enterprise in The Next Generation how to use a batleth and other Klingon martial arts. I have to say that was definitely one of my first, like, whoa, I might have been watching the action cartoons when I was a kid and all that kind of thing. But to see what Worf was capable of with his batleth was like, ooh, look at that. I think, Kill Bill definitely had me wanting to do more Taekwondo-based stuff. So, and that is what my black belt is in. My black belt is in Sangam Taekwondo. And there is a portion of the martial art that I was a part of and that I was teaching in called XMA. And that is basically high flying, lots of flips and tricks. And that's what was developed to sort of help people get ready and prepare for film roles. So absolutely, I think Kill Bill had a little bit of a like, oh man, how did they do that? Was it a wire or did that person actually do that move? And then going into Songnam Taekwondo and learning some XMA, this was many pounds less ago. To be brutally honest, it was years ago. But, I think that really did make a good impression on Taekwondo for me because, of course, when you're in the know, Taekwondo has a lot of really high-flying moves, lots of spin kicks, kicks to the head, things like that you don't necessarily see in a lot of traditional martial arts. And of course, there's different kinds of Taekwondo as well. There's more Olympic style, and then there's more of sort of like a martial art, more varied style. I did not do Olympic style Taekwondo. I did the more varied martial art style of Taekwondo. Um, and so I think that, there were times where, especially the little girls, if, even if they were not allowed to see the whole movie, which of course they wouldn't have been, a 9-year-old girl is not supposed to see Kill Bill, just saying it right out there. Oh, look, this looks colorful. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah, no, put on She-Ra, but, they see the outfit, they see Uma Thurman with a sword, and they're like, oh my gosh, a girl with a sword, and she's the hero of these movies. This is amazing. And so you definitely got the little girls who were like, I want to be like this someday. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to start with a foamy weapon. We're going to start with a stick. It's covered in foam. It's sometimes with the really little guys, instead of a sword, we would start with a pool noodle. You're 4 years old. I'm not giving you something with a hardcore to swing around. You're starting with a pool noodle. You can show me some control, and I can give you a foam stick. But that's when they're 4. As they get older, they can handle better things. But yeah.
Yes, people. Miss Bernal is expert in Taekwondo. Beware. So
a baby expert.
Expert.
Yeah. I'm at that point in time where, you get a certain level of competency and you realize, wow, I've only dipped my toe. So there's definitely a lot of people who are way more qualified than me, but I did teach for 6-7 years. Gosh. And black belts awarded. I won many competitions and things like that too, but still.
Congratulations, Miss Bernal. So if you compare Mr. Quentin to other director, to whom you can compare?
I think I would compare him to Stanley Kubrick. I think, the way that Kubrick handled things like 2001: A Space Odyssey and the different intercepting stories that you see there, I could connect. I could also connect up things like Stanley Kubrick's later work, which was completed by Steven Spielberg after Kubrick's death, which is AI, artificial intelligence. I think you could kind of make an association there with, again, the nonlinear nature of storytelling with different postmodern styles. I think that you can kind of make a Guy Ritchie claim too. You could look at things like Lock, Shock, and Two Smoking Barrels and other films that Guy Ritchie has done and really see some affinity there. You can see too a sort of, Guy Ritchie, obviously is focusing more on British culture and things like that in a lot of his content, not all of it, but a lot of it. And you get that same sense of this sort of, punkish, rebellious, lean back filmmaking, whether it's Lock, Shock, and Two Smoking Barrels, whether it's, the Sherlock Holmes movies that Guy Ritchie did, there's still this sort of rebellion in them, the same way that we see in a lot of Tarantino flicks. I think I look at something like Troy Duffy's Boondock Saints. And that one is a vigilante action thriller. If you have not seen the Boondock Saints, absolutely, that's another one I would very much say go for it. Go give it a watch. That one stars Willem Dafoe, Sean Patrick Flannery, Norman Reedus. Billy Connolly is also in it. And that has, again, that sense of violence, that sense of sort of the raw nature of certain storylines and things like that. I think Troy Duffy did a incredible job, both as the writer and director of the Boondock Saints. So I would definitely put Quentin Tarantino in the same sort of grouping that I would put Kubrick and Guy Ritchie and Troy Duffy.
Very well said, Miss Bernal. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our fourth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We talk about our Food 101 Volume 2 culinary course. Please do purchase our Food 101 culinary courses. And Miss Bernal, can you please plug in your books?
Hello. Okay, so as well as being a bit of a film buff, I do love cinema. I do have a, film school education. I'm also an author. I write cyberpunk and I write mythpunk books. So if you like cyberpunk or mythpunk, if you like emotionally charged characters who go into incredible action and also have just intense relationships within that action setting, you will like my stuff, most likely. That is Neon Lieben is my cyberpunk book number 1 in the Lieben cycle. I also have the Judge of Mystic Saga, starting with Charandash, Son of Abel, and Book of Revels, with the final book of the quartet, Ginungagap, coming out later on this year. I also have written horror. If you are into a sort of thriller horror kind of sphere, then you would love my novella, Whiskey and Sinner's Blood, where Carolee, a housewife in 1990s Ireland who works part-time at the butcher's in order to make ends meet, ends up finding out that her husband has sold their only child's soul to the Fairy Queen.
Interesting.
Hey, Tarantino, let's talk. I know you're only going to do 10 movies, but
Yes, please. Let's support Miss Safa Bernal because if you support her, more books to come. So, Miss Bernal, what else you can say about Pulp Fiction?
You have to see it. You have to see it. If you're okay with violence, again, if you're the kind of person that's like, oh, I like something that's more of, romantic fiction, or if you're somebody that's like, I really like watching a nice movie where things happen nicely in the end, don't watch this. But if you like action and if you're okay with a bit of zaniness, if you're okay with seeing, things like what Mia gets up to where she needs the adrenaline shot to heart, and different things, it's absolutely worth a watch. If you're on the fence, just watch it. If you end up being offended by Tarantino's work, I mean, it has its place and it has its purpose. And that purpose, in my opinion, is also for people to remember not to take life too seriously. Sometimes I think that we can stand on a soapbox of offense when you wouldn't want to kind of miss out on something like Pulp Fiction and what it meant to cinema and what it meant in these actors' careers and just the incredible depth and the incredible just talent of Quentin Tarantino's storytelling. Just kind of make some popcorn, have a beverage of your choice, whether that's coffee, tea, or something with a little something in it. Have a good time.
Have a good time, people. Pulp Fiction is highly recommended. If you're gonna rate it, Miss Bernal, where? 1 to 10?
9.
9.
Absolutely 9. I would give it a 9. Perfection is difficult.
Yes.
Perfection is difficult. I'm a little bit more like, the meme of a French teacher going, oh, yes, you were perfect. Everything you did was gold, 90%. It's like, I think it's one of those films that are going to go down in cinema history. I think it really is. And so even from a cinema history standpoint, if you're like, well, what was all the fuss about? What did it do to filmmaking? What did it represent in the market? And how did it kind of take the mid-90s and really give it a shake? Again, you're going to want to see it. It's not something that you can just kind of leave on the side of the road and go, well, I hear it was really important. Watch it. Go see it. It's definitely 9.5, something like that,
Yes. People highly recommend it. So, Miss Bernal, thank you for your time.
And thank you for yours. See you
Welcome,
later, everybody.
people. See you soon.